Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals. And this evening, my guest is David Delk, or David E. Delk, if you wish, who is running for the U.S. Congress. And that's pretty challenging, and I'm just so proud and glad that you're doing it. David is a long-time friend of mine, and I know some people in my life who are nice and okay, and some are very okay, and some are just beyond that. And David Delk is one of those few people, and one of my crew people is the same way in there. And I'm not going to say which one right now, but anyhow, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, great. I'm pleased to be on your show again.
Yeah. Not only that, but sometimes you sit in for me, and if I got to go away and host, and you do a wonderful job at that too.
Yeah.
You're going to mention something about your other series on television when you do your own show.
When I gave up my show, and I haven't done it for a while.
Coming, bringing it back.
And I think that come January that I will bring it back. Yes.
And what's the name of it?
Populist Dialogues.
Very excellent show.
Yeah.
And there are other things about you which I won't go into right now because I'll let you go into them because you're just so involved in so many things, and you're such a do-gooder and a tree hugger and all those kind of things.
Yes.
And I love you, man.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Oregon Progressive Party is David Delk for U.S. Congress. You're going to tell us about the Oregon Progressive Party and why you're running for the U.S. Congress. But first of all, we're going to do a brief bio because people will see this show who haven't seen you before. Mm-hmm. So we won't do a complete breakdown of your bio, but we'll do some and allow enough room for the stuff you'll be talking about when you talk about why you're running for the U.S. Congress.
Okay, good.
Yeah, okay. I'm not as nervous as I usually am because I'm so used to you anyhow. You're my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the guest. I'm the one that should be nervous. So.
That's what I mean.
So just transfer.
It really makes me mad. All right, I'll do some personal stuff on myself because I do this occasionally, even though people have seen me a lot of times. Who are you? Okay, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, of red, white, and black Roman Catholic parentage on December 26, 1928. Today I am a-religious and accepting of all others. I am a retired PhD clinical psychologist and present-day television broadcast journalist. I am the 12th of 12 children, am married, and am the father of 5 daughters by a first marriage. Politically, I'm a progressive, populist activist, still learning how to live lovingly. I'm still learning how to live lovingly. A few of my heroes include Jesus, Gandhi, MLK, and any other fellow human who is currently living lovingly. Yeah. If I were to ask your best friend, who is David, what would your best friend say? David is what? Be your best friend.
David is an activist.
Uh-huh.
That would probably be for, yes. And I think of one best friend who I have known. I first met her when I went to Portland State, 1970 probably. Mm-hmm. And we're still friends, and we still see each other quite frequently, actually. And why am I telling you this? Activist. So when I first met her, I was active at Portland State in the anti-Vietnam War things.
Ooh, your credentials go back.
My credentials go back, and prior to that, I had been active in the United Farm Workers lettuce and grape boycotts. Ooh. So I started doing that when I was in high school, and I was always a shy person, so I was never a leader in any of these things. But you have leaders, you have people who show up, and you have people that don't show up. So I always showed up.
You and Cesar Chavez.
Yes, all right, yeah. So yes, there's always. So anyway, Mary Kay would most definitely say
David
that I am an activist.
Not I. David is. Be her.
Yes, yes. David is. I can't do that. David is an activist.
Uh-huh.
Always has been. Always will be. It's at his core.
Okay. And when and where were you born, David?
Right here in Portland, Oregon. No place exotic like Louisiana.
Well, heavens, it has
Yes.
its own charm that's different than Louisiana. That's another country. Let's not go there. And anything significant about your national or cultural heritage?
No, I really can't think of anything. White. My mother's side of the family was German, and so my father's side, I really never met him. I don't know anything about him. I'm told the Delk name is Danish, but I don't know if that's the case.
Well, when he first saw you, he took off. He didn't show up anymore. I don't want
He didn't see us.
I'm going to poke you.
He wasn't there. My mother, actually, and this was 1950, so this was very rare. My mother divorced my father before my twin brother and I were born. That was really unheard of in 1950.
Yeah.
Women just didn't do that. So she was a pioneer, so to speak, a very strong person. And
Sort of like you?
No, much stronger than me. Much stronger than me.
Oh, you are strong, man.
Well, in certain areas, yes, I can be, but she was she was pretty amazing.
Yeah. A religious preference, do you have one?
No, I don't. I'm a member of the Unitarian Church, but that doesn't indicate a religious preference. That only indicates membership in a church.
Okay. Did you ever be part of a particular religion?
No.
Oh.
No. My mother was Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Her first marriage was to someone outside of the Catholic faith, and so she was essentially excommunicated. And so she never went to church, and I am so grateful for that, because she never expected me to go to church either.
Yeah. How about your formal education? What kind of schooling did you have?
Well, I went to Portland State in the Vietnam era time, and I graduated with a BS in sociology. Although I had more history credits, I should have gotten a degree in history, but I really don't know why I got it in sociology. But I was intending to be a high school teacher, and so I got a teaching certificate. And I never did teach because when I started, there was such a demand for teachers. By the time I finished 4 years later, there was no demand for teachers. The economy was not good, and people who were looking for teaching jobs were flying across the country. I was barely able to get enough bus fare to go across the city, and so I got a job immediately, and it wasn't teaching, so I never did teach. And then later on, I did go to Eastern Washington State College and started a master's program in history, focusing on labor history. But again, I didn't have the money to actually finish it, so I never finished that.
Why'd you take out some student loans?
Well,
You can tell me to shut up whenever I'm getting too smart.
well, there was, so far as the program at Eastern Washington, there were some other complicating factors as well.
Sure.
So money was only part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during your working career, are you working anymore? You're retired, aren't you?
I retired. Yes.
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 How's it feel?
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. 4 years of retirement. I just cannot remember a day when I have regretted retiring. And that was from the day that I left my employment. The very next day it seemed like heaven. And it seems that way now. So yeah. And I am constantly busy, hopefully doing good work.
I'm sure. Yes, you are. You are. Yeah. Okay. What did you do when you were working?
Most of the time I worked in the office furniture business. I started out with a stationery company when there were lots of them, small mom and pop stationery stores.
Yeah.
And those all went away. At any rate, I worked here in Portland, I worked in Spokane at one, and I worked in Seattle at one. The one in Seattle, I moved from the stationery part to the office furniture part, and then I spent most of my career working in office furniture here in Portland. And so I did that for about 30 years. And then I left there and went to work for Home Forward, which was the Housing Authority of Portland, in the contracts and purchasing division. And I was there for 5 years, and then I retired.
Okay. Yeah.
And that last job really did meet some of my desire to be helpful on social justice kind of things, because in addition to doing the purchasing and all that kind of stuff, I also was the one that determined whether any particular project was subject to either Davis-Bacon prevailing wages or to state MOLE wages. And that really got complicated, but at any rate, I was the one. But the most exciting part of that was then to actually go out to the job sites, interview workers, and actually verify that they were actually getting paid the wages that the contractors had contracted to pay. And in most cases they had, and in a few cases they hadn't, and sometimes it was very small. Other times it was larger. So we were able to recoup wages for workers. And then there was one time, one job site I went to that had a subcontractor there who was doing cleaning, and he had his 2 teenage daughters cleaning on the site as well. No, no, that's not okay. So we had a coming to Jesus kind of moment, and he got his daughters off the site.
So you got some sort of an idea about social justice at that time.
Yeah. Well, I had a pretty good idea about social justice prior to that, but in terms of actually being in the field, kind of thing, yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Do you have a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, or one of those?
Yeah, just one of those.
Which one?
No, I'm not going to tell you. No, I have a partner. His name's Tom. Mm-hmm. We have been together for 25 years.
25 years.
25 years.
He's put up with you all this time.
All that time, yeah, and yeah.
Sorry about that.
Sometimes I think that he is putting up with me. So I hope he doesn't feel that way.
He's a delightful human being, too.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. And no children or grandchildren?
No.
Your political persuasion, need I ask that question, or is it apparent?
It should be apparent, but in case it's not, I'm the chair of the Oregon Progressive Party, which is a left-leaning party that originally came into being. Actually, I don't know that much about the beginning stages of the party, but I understand that the party was formed primarily to promote Ralph Nader's presidential races. Yeah, and which I supported, and I wasn't a member of the party at the time. So anyway, that was the origins, and so the party itself, focus-wise, primarily supports limiting campaign contributions and all of the things that go into money in politics. And then it has particularly since I became a member of the state council, had a focus on opposing free trade agreements. It did before, but I've magnified the focus.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And
in the second half, we'll go into that more deeply.
Yeah. And so those are the two primary things about But in general, money in politics, clean government, transparency, issues like that with regard to government. And then if you go to the website, which is progparty.org, P-R-O-G for progressive, party.org. Mm-hmm. There's a whole list of positions that the Progressive Party takes that are different than what either the Democrats or the Republicans take.
Mm-hmm. Do you think about joining the Trump party?
No. I know that would be a Republican Party.
Don't hit me.
No. you're the host, and you can ask whatever you want, I guess.
And you can tell me where to go if you don't like the question. I got a tricky question here. Only a few people I challenge with this question because I'm not sure what the answer is myself, but I have an idea now. The difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion, will you take that on? Sympathy, empathy.
Sympathy is feeling sorry and hopefully understanding of another situation. Empathy is more being a part of that situation and experiencing the feeling and making it your own, so you're not standing in judgment. I think of being gay.
Uh-huh.
I think of the difference between being called a faggot, which is not sympathetic or empathetic.
No.
Or being called a homosexual, which, when that term was used, that tended to be a sympathetic, but it was always outside that. And an empathetic description would be gay, in which this is a hard question you just asked me.
I thought
You're just off
off
the cuff here, with no warning.
I like to do it that way.
Yeah.
And you can do it to me whenever you're ready.
No.
You've interviewed me before, remember?
Yeah. Well, I feel empathy for you as a guest, and so I wouldn't do that. No.
Yes, you would. And how about what was the other one?
Compassion.
Compassion. Yeah.
Compassion is a really great word. It's something we all need. It is something that you feel when you're not a part of something, and you feel compassion for something that you're not a part of.
And for me, you do something about a situation. Compassion implies doing something for me.
Okay. Yeah. It doesn't particularly for me, but maybe if I got my dictionary out, maybe it would. So.
Never mind your dictionary. All right. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. You belong to a bunch of those. You can mention those that are of some significance. And the ones that you're in, some of them, many of them, I'm a part of those organizations too. So I know where you're coming from. And when I say things about you that are complimentary, they're deserved.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I am a member of the First Unitarian Church in downtown Portland. Have been for probably 17, 18 years.
That's a while.
It is a while for someone who never thought that I would ever go to a church at all. But the nice thing about the Unitarians is they don't have a creed. They don't tell you what you need to believe in, and so you're free to believe what you want or not believe anything.
What do you believe in?
Let's move on.
Okay.
Well, I will say this. I think an awful lot of people spend an awful lot of time figuring out what life is going to be like after we leave this planet. I think that we need to focus on how we interact with each other and how we build institutions so that they are fair and empathetic and compassionate to all of us.
You got a good memory too, aren't you?
No, I don't. No. Yeah, so anyway, I find the Unitarians, some of them are a little too spiritual for me, and others of them are much more like me, and so there's a lot of activist Unitarians who really want to make the world better.
Yes.
Yeah, and so let's see. So other organizations, the East Side Democratic Club. I'm president of that
That's
for
great.
a couple of years
Good
now.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have monthly meetings, a couple of speakers each meeting to know our world better. And
So if people want to know more about that, they can go to your website or something, contact you, and learn more about those other organizations you're mentioning now.
Yes, East Side Democratic Club. I'm trying to think of. Well, we have a Facebook page, so I would go to Facebook to learn more about that. I founded the Move to Mend Portland organization, which advocates for a 28th Constitutional Amendment, saying that corporations are not people, as money is not speech. So usually when you hear talk about amending the Constitution, people talk about wanting to amend the Constitution to get over the ill effects of Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision. And that would only take us back to the position that we were in prior to the decision, which was overrun with special interests.
Yes.
So why would we want to overturn only that decision? So saying that corporations are not people, money is not speech, takes care of a whole bunch of court decisions that have happened prior to and since Citizens United. So that's Move to Mend PDX. And let's see, what else? And then I'm also the chair of the Oregon Progressive Party. Let's see, what else am I? Oh, Alliance for Democracy.
You're a big cheese over there.
You just got through saying I have a great memory. I almost forgot my major organization is Alliance for Democracy, which is where I spend most of my time.
Just a wonderful leader for us there.
Yeah. So we are a small but active grassroots organization.
And you're a position of power in the national organization, the Alliance for Democracy, aren't you?
Well, I don't know about
Co-chair.
power, but I am co-chair, yes. Yes, I am co-chair.
I'm political this morning.
Yes, all right, yeah. And so that organization works on establishing a true democracy, eliminating corporate domination, and establishing let's see if I can remember, establishing a just society based on an equitable, sustainable economy. That's the mission statement.
See, the memory's still there.
Takes a while longer, though. Yeah.
It just occurred to me, you said something, a magic word that whenever I hear it, it provokes the question from me, and I don't want to deviate too far again. You mentioned spiritual. What does spiritual mean for you when you say that? You use that term, spiritual.
Well, I don't focus on that. That was the reason why I said it, was because I don't focus, on spiritual.
Because you know what it is, that's what it is.
I have this kind of vague feeling. It's kind of one of those things when I hear someone talking spiritually, I recognize it, but I can't define it.
Of course.
But it generally, in my mind, is I focus on what happens to us after we leave here. Not here at the studio, Don.
I deserve that.
Well, when we leave this body form, and is there anything? Yeah. And people spend so much time focused on that question, and I don't spend almost any time focused on that question. My focus is how do we create the world we really want now?
Yeah.
Not later on.
Let me make a try at that, okay? Because I've asked it a number of times and I've learned a lot. See if I remember. It's a feeling, for want of a better term, that I experience, that I'm aware of, that's hard to describe. It occurs sometimes without my planning to have this kind of feeling happen. For example, if a little baby in a shopping cart in the checkout line looks over at me and mom's busy doing something and baby and I make eye contact, baby is maybe 3 months old or 4 months old, like that, and something happens, he sees me, and something more happens in his eyes. He sees me differently, and I see him. And it causes a feeling in me that's just so warm and fuzzy and tender, you know? And then as we're checking out, and I move around, baby's little head turns and follows me because he wants to connect the same way. Those kinds of feelings are indescribable that I look forward to whenever they occur. That's an experience that's spiritual, if I may.
Okay. All right. Yes, and that's not usually what I think of as being spiritual, but yeah. I could see it being defined that way.
All right.
Right. Yes.
We're almost through.
Okay.
Okay. How about some person or persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or look up to? Any names?
Well, when I've been on this show before, I think I've talked about people who are not with us anymore. But I do think of a couple of people. Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein are two people right now that I look up to. And
me too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think of Elizabeth Warren also, Senator Warren. And the work that she's doing. Right.
Kumbaya, my love. Kumbaya moment. Simpatico. And the people we look up to and admire, So let us take a break and come back and talk about why you're running for the U.S. Congress, David.
Yes.
Mr. Director. Yeah. Moving the chair. I'm glad you're staying here and to see some more of this show and what's going on here. We're going to get into some serious stuff about why David is running for the U.S. Congress. That's really an important reason. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr.Don. It's an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like my friend here, David, about who he is, and we talked about that. And we're going to talk about the title of the show, David Delk for U.S. Congress. All right, so let's start.
All right.
David,
Yeah.
why are you running for the U.S. Congress?
Okay, well, I have been active. One of my activist things for a very, very long time has been opposing so-called free trade, what I call corporate trade agreements. So those would be like NAFTA, the North America Free Trade Agreement.
Yes.
And then actually the United States has gotten 21 of these agreements that it has entered into. CAFTA,
21.
The Central America Free Trade Agreement, and then more recently we entered into agreements with Peru, Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. And there's a number of reasons why I oppose these agreements.
First of all, they call them free trade agreements. You said that doesn't sound like they're very free trade, are they?
Well, they're not free trade. They're not free, and they're mostly not about trade.
Oh.
They are a trade agreement would deal with quotas and import quotas and tariffs.
Sure.
And these hardly deal with those questions at all. And so the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the reason why I'm running against Earl Blumenauer.
Earl Blumenauer.
Yes.
You love him, don't you?
Generally, I do like him. But on this really, really, really important issue, he is totally in the wrong place.
He's for the trade agreement.
Well, he will not say whether he is for or against it. And this has been one of the problems, is that as time over the 20 plus years that he has been in Congress, he never tells us prior to his voting how he's going to vote. And then 74% of the time, and depending on how you work the numbers and count it, it could be higher, but we'll be give him the most generous. 74% of the time, he votes in favor of these free trade agreements. And this is something that most people in his district don't realize. They would assume that he votes against them.
Isn't he a rather progressive individual?
He is a progressive individual generally. And as a for instance, I talked earlier about this 28th constitutional amendment to say that corporations are not people and money is not speech. Well, there is a proposal in Congress called the We the People proposed amendment, which does that. And he had not signed on to it. We had a meeting, I was there. We had a meeting with him, and at the end of the meeting, so he came in and he was obviously, from what he was saying, totally on board. And so at the end, we said, well, there is this measure, why don't you co-sponsor it? And just a few months later, he did co-sponsor it. And so Oregon now has 2 representatives that support this proposed amendment. Let's see. So there are things like that where he is far in advance of most of the rest of the House of Representatives.
Why is he so different in this one? Maybe that's too hard a question to answer.
It really is too hard. We have looked at his campaign contributions, and his campaign contributions. There's nothing there that would indicate, that would point to being a reason why he supports it. The reason that he will tell you he supports it is that Oregon, and this is true, Oregon is one of the highest manufacturing states in the nation, and it is one of the highest exporting states in the nation. And he will tell you that our economy is very dependent on international markets. And then he will tell you that these trade agreements facilitate our exports. But that's just not the case. And the most recent agreement that we signed was with South Korea, and this was 4 years ago. And since that agreement was signed, President Obama, in promoting it, said 70,000 good-paying American jobs will be created if we pass this agreement. So we passed the agreement. 85,000 jobs have been lost as a result of that agreement. And the reason we can say that, and with that figure, is that the people that figure this out have used the same criteria that President Obama used in saying there will be 70,000 jobs created, and said, okay, let's look at what's actually happened. And what's actually happened is that Korea has exported many, many more times more products than it did prior to the beginning of the agreement. And the United States is exporting a little bit more, but not anywhere close. And
to justify those figures.
To justify, yes, right, yeah. And so in this 4-year period, our trade deficit has doubled with South Korea. And actually, if you look back at the other agreements that we have, in all cases, our trade deficits are worse with those nations than they were before. I think there may be a couple that's not the case, but almost all of them. So when you and then if you look at the nations that haven't signed agreements with us, our trade deficits are actually better than they were before. So we're actually exporting more to those countries that we don't have trade agreements with than the ones that we do. So so there's that. So he would point to this whole question about trade, and Governor Brown, Kate Brown, also endorsed the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that was what she also said.
The Oregon governor.
The Oregon Governor Brown, yes, right, yeah, and she pointed to our dependence on export as a reason for supporting it. So there's no question that there are a lot of jobs in Oregon that are dependent on export, but our thought is that if we pass this, our exports are probably not going to go up, but our imports will. And when we have increased imports, that means that those are goods that are not being manufactured here. And it's the manufacturing jobs generally pay quite well. And so we're essentially exporting our good American manufacturing jobs.
That seems like it requires simple common sense to decide, hey, this so-called free trade agreement with South Korea and similar free trade agreements are not benefiting the American people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who's benefiting from these?
Well, the multinational corporations. The multinational corporations benefited from NAFTA, which was our first free, quote-unquote, free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. Yes, right. And so multinational corporations that had manufacturing based in the United States suddenly were able to export the manufacturing or offshore the manufacturing and place it in Mexico, right on the other side of the border, employ much cheaper Mexican labor, and then when the United States approved normal trade relations with China, many of those manufacturers then moved to where the labor was cheapest, which was China.
Profit.
Yeah, and so greed. And so it has hollowed out the American middle class. The American middle class is a shadow of what it used to be, and at the same time, so that middle class has generally gone down. But at the top end, the profits and the salaries of the CEOs and the CFOs of those multinational corporations have increased. So this is one of the things that Bernie Sanders talked about was this whole issue of inequality and how it has increased and where does that come from. That's not all attributable to free trade agreements, but free trade agreements are a major component for the hollowing out of the middle class, the expansion of those at the bottom, and the enrichment of those at the top.
Now, this has been going on for some time.
This has been going on for some time. NAFTA was approved when President Bill Clinton was president. That would be about 24 years ago, would be my guess, in that area. And of course, it didn't start with him.
Yeah, of course.
The first President Bush actually negotiated NAFTA. And then prior to that, of course, President Reagan did his best to be sure that the policies that had benefited the middle class, to be sure that those policies were eliminated or trumped down.
Watch your language.
Anyway, but a major component of those pro-corporate, pro-multinational policies that have been instituted by both Republicans and Democrats since Reagan, the TPP is a part of those.
Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Right, yeah, and that really gets to the whole question about the inequality that we experience now. The United States is more unequal now than it has ever been.
I seem to recall a lot of discussion about some sort of an international court if there's a dispute between countries in trade matters, and it supersedes Americans' sovereignty and their own laws that we live by.
Yes, and this actually gets to the heart of why I dislike this agreement and why I dislike all of these other agreements, because they all have what was in NAFTA was called Chapter 11.
Chapter 11.
Yeah, and Chapter 11 contained this investor-state dispute settlement provisions.
Will you say that again?
Investor-state dispute settlement provisions.
Disputes, huh?
Yeah, so that was a disagreement, and disagreements between corporations and nations. And it was the first time that allowed a multinational corporation to sue a national government.
Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah.
To make it a little clearer?
So with this, I should say that was the first time that they were able to sue. It was the first time they were able to sue in private trade tribunals.
Private trade tribunals.
Right.
What does that got to do with the laws and rules of a given country?
Well, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with it, and that's the whole point, is the multinational corporations have been striving, and with these agreements are relatively successful, at figuring out how to get out of control of our governments.
Okay. So there's a super government now.
It in effect is. So these multinational corporations are able to sue national governments when a unit of the government, and it could be a state or it could be a local government, makes a decision which negatively impacts their future profits.
Future profits?
Future profits.
What is this? Future profits? I
Yeah.
thought we were talking about the reality of what's going on today.
Yes. Well, we should be. And first of all of those kind of disputes should go to national courts. And so this is a way of getting around national courts and imposing decisions. So these decisions that these private trade tribunals make are imposed on governments, and governments, if they're on the losing end of these suits, either have to pay whatever the claim is, or they have to change their law, or they have to do both. And there's no appeal of those decisions.
Oh, who are the members of this tribunal?
Well, there are panels of judges which are associated with the World Trade Organization or with the World Bank, and these judges, who are all pre-selected, then form a pool, and both the multinational corporation gets to pick one judge, the nation gets to pick one judge, and then they agree on a third judge, and the judges can only consider trade rules. Did the nation violate a trade rule? They don't get to consider, did the nation act in the benefit of their citizens?
Yeah.
Did the nation act for the benefit of our environment? Did the nation protect our water supplies? Those kind of questions are not asked by the trade tribunals, and their decisions are not affected by it.
You said a magic word a moment ago, pre-selected, and just by the wayside. What is that? Who selects?
I don't know. Good question. I don't know, but they are.
Isn't ordinary people like you and I?
It's certainly not you and I. No, we're going into the stratosphere of elite selection process, and I don't know what the process is.
Of course.
But they are pre-qualified to be judges. because they're experts in trade law.
Shouldn't we know who these people are and who pre-selected them?
Yeah, yes.
That's a democracy, isn't it?
Yes, it is part of. Yeah, it's the whole question about transparency. Yeah, and that's the other thing is that these suits are not necessarily even known to us. Some of these suits are actually private suits, and quite frequently the decisions are not known to us. So all of the things that we think of in terms of being democratic, one of which most important is transparency, don't happen in these private trade tribunals. One of the other things that doesn't happen, if Oregon passed a law which a Canadian company was affected by and they could claim that their future profits were diminished as a result, they would sue the American federal government. They would not sue Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government would go to the tribunal and represent Oregon. But frequently, the interests of the federal government can be quite at odds with the interests of a state or of a city. And so we're dependent on somebody else representing. We don't have a presence at the table when the suits are discussed.
You mentioned corporatocracy. Does that pretty well describe what's going on in our government, in our system?
And yes, and that's exactly what has been developed, and this is a very, very major component of it. This whole question about corporate personhood and corporations being people and having human rights under the U.S. Constitution, which is one of the things that we want to end with a constitutional amendment that says corporations are not people and money is not speech. So we need to address that at that level. But these trade tribunals take that whole idea of corporate personhood to the international level. And the other part of this is that it empowers multinational corporations over domestic corporations, because domestic corporations don't have the ability to take cases to these private trade tribunals. Maybe we should be grateful for that. But it does point to the unequal status of domestic corporations versus multinational corporations.
So the abundance inherent in the American system and what's going on with the American experiment becomes insubordinate or not helpful in having what we're supposed to be about in the form of a democracy and benefiting the ordinary citizen. So is there a real class warfare going on?
Well, I would say it is a class war. There are other people who don't think. What really is it really is kind of hard to call. I think it's kind of hard to call it a class war because class wars happen between people, and when we're talking about corporations, we're not talking about people. Although the CEOs and the high mucky-mucks of these corporations most clearly do benefit, the corporations themselves are not people. And that's important. Corporations are collections of capital. They're property.
But they're treated
not
as people.
No.
Do you think we're going to eventually overturn Citizens United?
Oh, yes. Oh, almost definitely. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Will I still be alive?
Yes, you will.
I
think so. Well, it really depends. It depends on whether Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump wins the election. If Donald Trump wins the election, we won't see it for the next 8 years. If Hillary Clinton wins the election, depending on who she puts onto the Supreme Court, will determine whether we see an end to Citizens United and possibly these other decisions that have taken our democracy away from us.
Didn't Trump say that he doesn't like the free trade agreements and he would look at them a little more closely and reorganize them, or some mealy mouth?
Yes, he has.
So
he has.
Wouldn't you like to support Trump then for that reason, if he's going to do something about the trade agreements, free trade agreements?
No.
You can hit me if you want to. I don't mind.
There's so many other aspects that that come into play.
Of course.
No, I certainly couldn't. Well, plus, there's the whole believability factor. I don't believe that.
Don't you believe Trump?
No, I don't believe him. I don't know why he has spoken so negatively about these agreements. I'm glad that he has, but I don't trust him for a moment to actually act on that if he was in office. I mean, and I'll say this about Hillary also. Hillary Clinton has come out against this particular agreement in its present form. She's been a little weaselly about how she phrases her opposition. She was for it when she was Secretary of State. It was negotiated while she was Secretary of State. She called it the gold standard of trade agreements for how future trade agreements would be. And then Bernie Sanders came out so much against the Trans-Pacific Partnership and free trade agreements that she was pushed to assume that position. And so I hope that that's a sincere position and that she would follow through on it if elected. I'm very doubtful.
Sincerity, we're measuring the degree of sincerity in these two candidates. Do you think one would likely be more sincere than the other?
No. No.
Is that why you're voting for Jill Stein, or you're voting for her?
I am voting. I will vote for Jill Stein.
Yeah.
And the Oregon Progressive Party has endorsed her as our presidential candidate.
What do you think about Bernie Sanders and what he's done, throwing in his lot with the Democratic Party?
Well, Bernie Sanders did a really great thing in running, and I'm very, very grateful that he did. And he is clear and articulate, and
he's beautiful, man.
He is able to express that vision of the world we want in a way that Hillary Clinton never can. So I was disappointed. I totally expected that when he announced as a Democrat that he was going to run as a Democrat, that in the end he would end up endorsing Hillary Clinton. So I didn't particularly feel disappointed that he had done that. I expected it.
Okay, you were a step ahead of me on that one.
So he did what was expected, and but what I'm really grateful for is that we do have a candidate like Jill Stein, Dr. Stein, running as the Green Party candidate for president. She, of course, has been locked out of the debates, as has the Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson.
That makes me so angry when I think about this commission that was created by the Democratic Republican parties that says democracy is by the wayside, forget about it.
Yes. Yeah.
They replaced the League of Women Voters, huh?
Yeah, and most people don't realize this, that these presidential debates are sponsored by the Democratic and the Republican parties. And so they have no reason to put minor party candidates up there and give them a podium. And they don't, and they probably never will. And it's really, really important at some point, and I'm not sure how we do this, but that the League of Women Voters become the sponsors of presidential debates, again, like they used to be.
You know, I'm aware the time is running out, and before we get too close to the end, I'd like you to talk to the viewers directly about what we've been talking about so far, anything else, a message that would be useful for them to get from you about this issue and what's going on and why you're running for the U.S. Congress.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I'll look at that camera. Right. Yeah. So I decided that because Representative Blumenauer would not tell us what his position will be on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And because this is such an important issue, and because there is nobody else running that will pose this question, that I would throw my hat into the ring and run against him. And so I have done that. I have my voters pamphlet statement will be in the voters pamphlet. It will be a clear statement of opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as well as a statement about some other positions that I also support. But clearly the focus is on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. When I talk about it, I want to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and why we need to oppose it. And I don't expect, I'm told I'm never ever supposed to say this. I don't expect to win because I'm a realist. Yeah. But I do expect that I will get enough votes that it will make an impression on Earl Blumenauer that he needs to vote no on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so my ask for viewers right now, if you're in his district, which is Oregon's 3rd district, if you're in his district, my first ask is call Representative Blumenauer, tell him that you're going to vote for me, and that you're going to vote for me because of my opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then secondly, my second ask is that you go to my website, which is daviddelk.org, click on the endorse and get yourself added as an endorser of my campaign. You'll also find a donate button there. This is an extremely low budget campaign. If I spend $1,000, I'll be really surprised. But if I had a little more money, I might spend it. And then volunteer for my campaign. I need help handing this little flyer out.
About 10 seconds more.
And so that's my message. No Trans-Pacific Partnership, and let Earl Blumenauer know that that's what you feel by voting for me in November.
Hey!
Thank you, Don.
Great.
Good.
I'm glad you came aboard and enjoyed you very much, as I usually do. And a couple PSAs, do we have time? Thanks for watching. Remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable to you too. And you too behind the monitor in there. See you next time.